Listen very closely because what I'm about to share will directly impact everyone watching this video right now. Whether you own a home, are trying to buy one, or are renting, this concerns you. The United States is facing a real estate problem, and it's not just serious, it's catastrophic. Before I dive into the numbers and explain exactly why this is going to hit your wallet harder than anything we've seen in decades, I need you to take action. Hit that subscribe button immediately. Smash it. If you care about your money, if you care about building real wealth, you need to be part of this community. Here, we tell it like it is, no sugarcoating, no nonsense, just straight facts about money. Now, let's get into it. I've been in business for over 40 years. I've built companies. I've invested hundreds of millions of dollars. I've seen markets crash, and I've seen them soar. And I'm telling you, what's happening in American real estate right now is unlike anything I've experienced in my entire career. We are staring down the barrel of a crisis that most people don't even see coming. But I see it, and by the end of this video, you will see it too. Why housing is becoming unaffordable is the next reality we need to face. The American dream has always centered around one key idea: owning your own home. You work hard, save your money, buy a house, build equity, and pass that asset down to your children. That's how it's supposed to work. That's how my generation did it. That's likely how your parents did it too. But for millions of young Americans today, that dream is gone. And it's not because they're lazy. It's not because they spend too much on coffee. The truth is, the system is broken. Let me show you some numbers, because numbers don't lie. Right now, the median home price in America is about 7 times the median household income. 7 times. Do you know what it was in the early 2000s? Around 4 times. And back in the 1970s? About 2.5 times. Do you see the trend here? Housing prices have completely detached from what people actually earn. And when prices disconnect from income, you get a bubble. And bubbles, without fail, always burst. But here's why this situation is different from 2008. Back then, the crisis was about subprime mortgages. Banks were giving loans to people who couldn't afford them. The system was built on junk. When it collapsed, it was disastrous, but at least we understood the problem: bad loans. This time, the issue isn't loans, it's supply. We simply don't have enough homes. We're not building enough, and the homes that do exist are being scooped up by people or entities who have no intention of living in them. Let me break this down for you in terms of supply and demand, because this is basic economics, though apparently nobody in Washington seems to get it. When there are more buyers than homes, prices go up. That's just math. And right now, in America, millions of people want to buy homes, but the inventory doesn't exist. We're short by millions of units. Some estimates suggest we need to construct 5 million new homes just to catch up to where we should be: 5 million. And we're nowhere near building at that rate. Why aren't we building? That's a great question. Let me explain. First, it's too expensive. The cost of materials has skyrocketed. Lumber, steel, concrete, everything has gone up in price. Labor has also become significantly more costly. And when your input costs rise, your final product naturally becomes more expensive. So even if builders want to create affordable housing, the numbers simply don't work. They can't make a profit on it. Second, regulations. I'm not saying we don't need building codes or safety standards, but in many cities and states, the regulatory burden is so heavy, slow, and costly that it adds years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to every project. You've got zoning laws written decades ago that no longer make sense. You've got environmental reviews that drag on endlessly. You've got local politicians who claim to support affordable housing but then block every development in their district because they don't want it near them. And third, land. In the cities where people actually want to live, where the jobs are, there's almost no land left. And the land that is available costs a fortune. So developers are stuck. They can't build where people want to live because it's too expensive. And if they build where it's cheap, nobody wants to move there because jobs aren't available. So what's the result? We get a market where supply simply can't meet demand. And when that happens, prices skyrocket. That's exactly what we've seen over the past several years. Now let me tell you who's benefiting in this environment. It's not the young couple trying to buy their first home. It's not the family hoping to upgrade to a bigger place. It's the investors. It's the institutions. It's the people and companies with cash who can outbid everyone else. I'm talking about private equity firms. I'm talking about hedge funds. I'm talking about foreign investors. They view American real estate as a safe place to park their money, and they're buying up properties by the thousands. And here's the kicker: many of these investors aren't even renting these homes out. They're simply holding on to them, treating houses like stocks: buy it, hold it, wait for it to appreciate, then sell it. Meanwhile, the house sits empty. So now, not only do we have a shortage of homes, but we also have properties being removed entirely from the market just so someone can use them as financial assets. It's insane. This is creating an entire generation of renters. People who, 30 years ago, would have been homeowners are now stuck renting because buying is simply out of reach. And renting isn't cheap either. Rent has skyrocketed almost as fast as home prices, meaning people are paying $2,000 a month or more on rent. Money that's gone forever. It's not building equity. It's not building wealth. It's just enriching someone else. And here's the bigger picture: what does this do to the economy? When people can't afford to buy homes, they don't spend on all the things that come with homeownership. They don't buy furniture. They don't buy appliances. They don't hire contractors. They don't invest in their local communities. Homeownership is the foundation of middle-class wealth in this country. And when that foundation is removed, the middle class gets hollowed out. When I look at young people today, folks in their 20s and 30s, I see them working hard, doing everything right, and yet they still can't get ahead. They're burdened with student loans, car payments, credit card debt, and now they're being told that if they want to buy a home, they need to save up $100,000 for a down payment. Where are they supposed to get that money? It's simply not realistic. This is why I'm so fired up about this issue. This isn't just a real estate problem, it's about the future of this country. If we don't fix this, an entire generation will grow up without the ability to build wealth. And when people can't build wealth, they become frustrated, disillusioned, and angry. They lose faith in the system, and that's dangerous for everyone. But here's where it gets even uglier. What I just described is bad enough, but there's another layer that most people don't understand, and this layer will determine whether America remains the land of opportunity or turns into a country of landlords and tenants. We need to examine who's profiting from this crisis and why the people in power aren't taking action. Let's start with the investors I mentioned earlier. When I talk about institutional investors buying up homes, I'm not referring to mom-and-pop landlords who own a few rental properties. I'm talking about massive corporations with billions of dollars. These companies have a plan, a strategy that's brilliant from a business perspective but disastrous for everyday Americans. They move into markets, identify undervalued properties or areas about to grow, and buy up everything they can get their hands on. These investors pay in cash. They close deals fast. And they outbid families every single time. How can they do this? Because they have access to cheap capital. They can borrow money at rates that ordinary people like you and me could never qualify for. They have established relationships with banks. They have investors backing them. And they can afford to take losses on individual properties because they're playing the long game. They're building massive portfolios, sometimes thousands of homes. Once they dominate a market, they gain pricing power. They can set rents. They can dictate terms. It's a monopoly, but in real life and real people are the ones being squeezed. And here's what makes me furious: these companies are doing all of this with the blessing of our financial system. Banks love it because they're lending huge amounts of money. Wall Street loves it because they can bundle the rental incomes into securities and sell them to investors. Everyone is making money except the people who actually need a place to live. Let me be clear, I'm a capitalist. I believe in free markets. I believe in making money. But I also believe markets have to work for everyone, not just the people at the top. When ordinary people can't compete because the system is stacked in favor of institutions, that's not capitalism. That's something else. And it's not sustainable. Here's a real example. In neighborhoods and cities across America, 30, 40, sometimes 50% of the homes are now owned by investors. Think about the impact this has on a community. When half of the neighborhood is rentals, there's no sense of long-term investment in the area. People move in and out constantly. There's no stability. Properties aren't maintained the way an owner would maintain them. The character of the neighborhood shifts. And for those who actually own homes there, their property values are affected. It becomes a downward spiral. Now, let's talk about interest rates, because this is where the Federal Reserve comes into play. For years, interest rates were near zero. That was fantastic if you were borrowing money, but terrible if you were trying to save. Those low rates made it incredibly cheap to borrow for real estate. What happened? Anyone who could borrow money did. Investors borrowed. Individual buyers borrowed. Prices kept rising because borrowing was so cheap. Then inflation hit, and the Fed had no choice but to raise rates to try to cool the economy. Today, mortgage rates are roughly 3 times higher than they were just a few years ago. And that has created a brand new problem. People who bought homes when rates were low are now locked in. They've got mortgages at 3%, 3.5%, and they're not selling. Why? Because if they sell and try to buy another home, the new mortgage will be at 7 or 8%. So, they stay put. What does this mean for the market? Even less inventory. Combine that with high prices and high interest rates, and you have the perfect storm. If you're trying to buy a house right now, you're getting squeezed from every angle. Homes cost far more than they reasonably should. Available housing is extremely limited. And borrowing the money to buy one has become astronomical. For many people, it feels almost impossible. And let me be clear about who this impacts the most. It's first-time buyers. Young families. People trying to move out of a small apartment into a home where they can raise their children. These are the individuals being shut out of the housing market. Meanwhile, investors who already own property are benefiting enormously. Their assets continue to appreciate. They collect rent. They are making money hand over fist. Now let's talk policy, and this is where I really start to lose patience. We have politicians who stand up and claim they care about affordable housing. They give speeches. They make promises. But when it comes time to take meaningful action, they do nothing. Or worse, their actions sometimes make the problem even worse. Here are some examples. Many cities have rent control. I understand why people think it's a good idea. Rents are rising, and they want to protect tenants. But here's the reality of rent control: landlords stop investing in their properties because they can't raise rent to cover their costs. Developers halt construction of new rental housing because it's no longer profitable. The result? Fewer homes, not more. It's basic economics, yet politicians ignore it because telling the truth is politically unpopular. Then there are zoning laws. I've mentioned them before, but it's worth digging deeper. In most American cities, the majority of residential land is zoned exclusively for single-family homes. You cannot construct an apartment building. You cannot build a duplex. You cannot develop anything other than one house on a single lot. Maybe this made sense 70 years ago, when cities were smaller and less populated. But today, when we desperately need more density and more housing in the areas where people want to live, these laws are holding us back. And who fights to maintain these restrictive zoning laws? Homeowners. People who already own property often resist new housing developments near them because they fear it will lower their property values or change the character of their neighborhoods. They attend city council meetings, speak up, and successfully block new projects. Politicians listen to them because they vote, and their voices are organized and powerful. Meanwhile, the people who actually need housing, the young, the renters, are not organized. They rarely attend these meetings. Their voices go unheard. This is exactly what I mean when I say the system is broken. The incentives are all misaligned. Those with power benefit from keeping housing scarce, while those who need homes have no influence, and nothing changes. So, what needs to happen? Let me be blunt. We need to build millions of new homes. We need to make construction easier, faster, and more affordable. That means cutting red tape. That means reforming zoning laws. That means investing in infrastructure so that new areas can be developed efficiently. It also means knowing when to let government step back and when to have government step in. I know that sounds contradictory, but here's what I mean. The government must stop obstructing development with unnecessary regulations. At the same time, the government also has to invest in critical infrastructure: roads, water systems, public transportation, the essential foundations that make it possible to create new communities. Private developers cannot handle this alone. It requires public investment. We also need an honest conversation about who should be allowed to buy residential real estate in this country. I'm not saying we should ban foreign investors. I'm not saying institutional investors should be prohibited. But maybe we need some guardrails. Perhaps there should be limits on how much of a neighborhood can be owned by investors. Maybe we need tax incentives for first-time homebuyers and tax penalties for entities that are buying homes solely to flip them or leave them vacant. Some people will call that government overreach. They'll say the market should decide. But let me be clear, the market is deciding, and what it's deciding is that regular people lose. So maybe it's time to tip the scales a little in favor of the people who actually want to live in these homes. Here's the bottom line: we are at a crossroads. We can continue down this path, where housing becomes increasingly expensive, where homeownership is only for the wealthy, and an entire generation is locked out of building wealth. Or we can make tough decisions. We can change policies. We can prioritize housing the way we prioritize other critical national issues. But doing that requires leadership, and right now, I don't see that leadership. So what happens if we don't fix this? What will America look like in 10 years, 20 years, if we continue on this trajectory? Let me paint a picture for you, and I promise, you won't like it. But you need to hear it because this is exactly where we're headed if we don't change course right now. Picture an America where homeownership is something only the upper class can afford, where the middle class, the backbone of this country, has been reduced to permanent renters. Imagine a future where your children and grandchildren will never own a home, no matter how hard they work. This isn't some dystopian fantasy. This is the reality we are creating today through the decisions we make right now. When homeownership rates fall, wealth inequality skyrockets. And I'm not talking about some abstract economic theory, I'm talking about real, tangible wealth. The kind of wealth that decides whether your kids can afford college, whether you can retire with dignity, whether you have anything to pass on to the next generation. For most Americans, their home is their largest asset. It's how they accumulate wealth. Take that away, and people end up with nothing, working their entire lives and ending up with zero net worth. Let me break down the math because math doesn't lie. Let's say you're renting and paying $2,000 a month. Over 30 years, that adds up to $720,000 in rent. And at the end of those 30 years, you own absolutely nothing. Zero. Now, let's say you buy a house with a mortgage. You're paying roughly the same amount each month, maybe a little more when you include property taxes and maintenance. But at the end of 30 years, you own an asset, and that asset has likely increased in value. Even if we assume only modest appreciation, you're still looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity. That's the difference between financial security and poverty, between a comfortable retirement and uncertainty. But here's what makes this crisis even more dangerous. When people can't afford to buy a home, they often can't afford to start a family. I'm serious, look at the data. Birth rates are falling in America. People are getting married later, having fewer children. And when you ask why, one of the main reasons is financial insecurity. They can't buy a home, so they feel they can't raise a family. Many are living in one-bedroom apartments or sharing space with roommates well into their 30s. This has enormous consequences for our economy, for society, and for the future of our country. Who's going to pay into Social Security if there aren't enough young workers? Who's going to buy the goods and services that keep our economy moving? Who will care for the aging population? We're creating a demographic time bomb, and nobody is addressing it. Now let's talk about the social consequences, because this isn't just about money. When a small number of people own the majority of wealth and everyone else is struggling just to get by, resentment grows. Anger grows. People lose faith in the system. They start to believe the game is rigged, and honestly, in many ways, they're right. Right now, the system is stacked against the average person. I've seen this play out in other countries, where a tiny wealthy elite dominates everything and the rest of the population struggles to survive. And let me tell you, those societies are not stable. Those are communities where crime is high, trust is low, and people have lost faith in their institutions. Is that really the America we want? Because that's exactly the path we're heading down if we don't wake up. And here's what really frustrates me: this entire crisis is preventable. This isn't a natural disaster or something beyond our control. This is a man-made problem. We created it through poor policies, through regulatory capture, and by prioritizing the interests of a few over the needs of the many. The good news? That means we can fix it, but only if we have the will to act. So here's what you, the person watching this video, need to do. First, educate yourself. Don't just take my word for it. Look at the data. Understand what's happening in your local market. Knowledge is power, and you need to know exactly what challenges you're facing. Second, if you're in a position to buy, do it. I know it's expensive. I know it feels overwhelming. But if you can find a way into the market, whether it's a small condo or a home in a less desirable neighborhood, do it. Because the alternative is renting forever, and that's financial suicide. Build equity while you still can. Even if it means short-term sacrifices, it will pay off in the long run. Third, if you're locked out of the market, don't give up. Start saving aggressively. Cut unnecessary expenses. Take on a side hustle. Do whatever it takes to build a down payment. I know it seems impossible, but I've seen people succeed. It requires discipline, effort, and sacrifice, but it is possible. Also, look into programs designed for first-time homebuyers. There are grants available, low-interest loans, and other programs that can help you get your foot in the door. There are programs available that can help. You need to do your homework, but the resources exist, you just have to look for them. Fourth, and this is crucial, get politically involved. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, or anything else. This issue affects all of us, and it should unite us. Start attending your city council meetings. Ask your representatives what they're doing to address the housing crisis. Vote for candidates who have real, actionable plans to increase the housing supply. Hold them accountable. Politicians respond to pressure, but only if we apply it. We need to demand that our leaders reform outdated zoning laws. We need to demand that they streamline the permitting process. We need to demand that they invest in infrastructure. We need to demand that they create incentives for building affordable housing. And we need to demand that they put guardrails on institutional investors who are distorting the market. I'm not naive. I know that changing policy is difficult. I know there are entrenched interests benefiting from the status quo. But we have something powerful on our side: numbers. Millions of Americans are being harmed by this crisis. If we organize and speak with one voice, we can force change. But it starts with you. It starts with individuals deciding they will no longer accept this system. Now, let me address the homeowners watching this video. I know some of you might be thinking, well, my house has gone up in value, so this is good for me. And yes, on paper, you might be wealthier. But let me ask you something: do you have children? Do you have grandchildren? Because they are the ones who are truly getting hurt by this crisis. Your home equity doesn't matter much if your kids or grandkids can never afford to buy their own homes. Think about the kind of world you're leaving for them. Now, think about your community. Do you want to live in a neighborhood where everyone is a renter?
Where people are constantly moving in and out? Where nobody has a real stake in improving the community? That's exactly what happens when homeownership becomes unaffordable.
Sure, your property value might rise in the short term, but the overall quality of life declines. We need homeowners to be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
That means supporting new housing developments even if they're in your backyard. That means acknowledging that we need density. We need more units.
This isn't a threat to your lifestyle, it's how we ensure the next generation has a fair chance to build wealth.
Let me wrap this up because I know I've shared a lot.
Here's what you need to remember: America is facing a housing crisis that threatens the very foundation of middle-class prosperity. Prices are too high, supply is too low, and the people in power aren't doing enough to fix it. If we don't act now, we risk creating a permanent renter class.
We risk hollowing out the middle class. And we risk fundamentally changing what it means to be American. But it doesn't have to be this way. We can fix it. We can build more housing. We can make it more affordable. We can make certain that the American dream of homeownership remains within reach for the next generation. But achieving this requires action from all of us.
It demands that we get involved. It demands that we insist on change.
It demands that we hold our leaders accountable. This channel exists to give you the unvarnished truth about money, business, and the economy.
And the truth is, we are facing serious challenges.
But I still have faith in this country. I still have faith in the American people. And I firmly believe that when we acknowledge a problem, we also have the power to solve it.